John Rothman on KGO 810 and streaming online at KGOradio.com. Join the conversation at 80810. Now, John Rothman on KGO 810.
I'm just so tempted to make my voice as low as possible. Hi, this is John Rothman. No, it's not. Hi, John Rothman has the evening off. I'm Angie Cuero sitting in for him. We got a whole passel of stuff to talk about tonight. Later on, before I leave you this evening, we're going to be talking about what prisons are for. What are they for? We don't agree as a society. Are they about rehabilitation? Are they about punishment? Are they about redemption? What are they for? There are so many other problems with the prison system that we won't be able to solve until we figure out why we're putting people away. That's a topic for later this evening. We're also going to be talking about the decision from Colt to stop producing AR-15s for consumers because there are enough of them out there. Interesting stuff. And we're going to finish up this evening with an hour on the best and worst driving songs. A list came out earlier this week of the most dangerous ones, and I thought we'd get to you and say, hey, what are your favorites? What are the ones you just can't drive to? That's the fun stuff that we're going to wrap it up with tonight on the John Rothman Show. But for this hour, I finally got to my boil-over point with Trump's obsession with California. Donald Trump hates California. Now, he will come to California and get buckets of money very quietly in dark places where people don't want to be seen. But out in public, gosh, we're horrendous. We're evil. We're sick. Our homeless people are the worst homeless people. Our best people probably don't belong here, and they're being abused by the homeless people. I mean, good Lord. There are plenty of discussions to be had, and we're going to have part of it this hour, too, on what the heck is wrong with Donald Trump in general, but particularly looking at the beginning of this hour as to what this obsession he has with California. What does that tell us about him? And I don't want to just speculate, because I'm not into speculating. I thought we'll go to a professional. What ho, there is a professional on the telephone. And Justin Frank, you know him from his various couch books, Bush on the Couch and Obama on the Couch, and now we have Trump on the Couch. And the guy who takes a very serious look at the minds of our leaders is an author who practices and teaches psychoanalysis in Washington, D.C. He spent time as a clinical professor of psychiatry at the George Washington Medical University Medical Center, and now he's again on KGO. Justin Frank, welcome back. Thank you for joining me again.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here again.
Let me ask you, when you look at Donald Trump's hatred, his deep, deep hatred and his constant slamming of California, maybe I'm overly sensitive because I'm a Californian. Does it stand out to you as well that he just has a special loathing just for us?
Yes, he does. It stands out to me as well. And actually, I'm a native Californian myself, and although I live in Washington. What? A Berkeley grad. Right.
Oh, you're a Berkeley, and he hates you even more, you hippie.
I know. He hates me for lots of different reasons. But I am from California. I am a Berkeley grad, and I knew a lot of movie stars as a kid because I grew up in Hollywood. So there you have it. The issue for Trump is one of the basic sources of hatred for most all of us at times is envy. We hate something we can't have for ourselves, and we need to either put it down or even destroy it or spoil it. It's an attack on goodness. Mm-hmm. It's been most obvious before Hollywood or before California how much he hated and envies Obama.
Yes.
He has to spoil every single thing that Obama has ever accomplished. He goes out of his way to undo any regulation, including some of the good regulations about car emissions and things in California. Any of the things that Obama has accomplished, he wants to spoil and undo. Any treaties, any organizations, every single thing. It does not matter. Now, the sources of that has to do, at first a lot of people would think it's about racism, and there's a racist quality to it, but it's also about an attack on the good. He hates people who are good because they're better than him. he's not good, and he knows it.
Does he know
So
it?
we're talking.
One of the things about ego is a fascinating thing because he
Yes.
certainly does seem to be full of ego, and yet there's that contradictory impression that he knows he's not what he builds himself up to be.
Right. It's a compensatory. What people talk about his malignant narcissism, which I've also written about. That's compensatory for feeling weak and inadequate and unloved. So now we can go. He didn't need Obama's love. He just hated Obama's goodness and the fact that Obama was loved. But going to California, he has been rejected by California several times. He's tried to be in movies, and he could only get bit parts in the 70s and 80s. He bought a bunch of places and properties in Southern California, hoping to make his mark there, and he never did. And he put on an addition to the Ambassador Hotel in L.A., which is where the Coconut Grove was, the famous Coconut Grove.
Mm-hmm.
And so he really has tried to make inroads into California. And in a way, he had a similar problem in California to the problem he had in New York. There's a thing in New York where people who are wealthy, cultured, educated, they call people who come into New York using the bridge members of the Bridge and Tunnel Club. Those are people, Bridge and Tunnel crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Those are people who want to be included in New York society. Trump was always seen as part of the Bridge and Tunnel crowd. His accent was uncouth. He's very uneducated. He can't have a conversation about anything in a meaningful way. So he was always excluded. California is very similar to him, for him, and that he feels very excluded, and he can't, and really not liked. And the people in California who are stars, they don't love him. And I think that it really is based on a kind of envious hatred. He wrote a book which is not very much read, called The Art of the Comeback. And it's really, and he went on a book tour, and it was very much on morning shows, a Hollywood star, and he was telling his story about a star who loses his glitter and comes back.
Mm.
And Trump was really wrote about that as if it was about him, and he was going to come back by being a star in Hollywood, which is what he did come back to some extent with The Apprentice. But basically, the real people who make comebacks, and this is where we can come back and dovetail to envy, the real people who make comebacks have a quality that Trump does not have, and that is humility and forgiveness. He is unable to be humble. And forgiveness, he doesn't forgive anybody who's hurt him. He wants to strike back and destroy them.
How is someone who is this emotionally crippled, how then is he so, at least on the face of it, successful? He is ostensibly the leader of the free world. He has a ton of money. He seems to be pretty darn successful.
Well, he does seem to be successful, and he is president of the United States. I mean, what could be more successful than being president of the United States? I mean, he really is. And he has a lot of people who also share with him a certain kind of narcissistic injury, and those are the people who are at his rallies, who have also felt left out, passed by. They'll never go to Hollywood. They'll never be glamorous. They'll never be rich. They won't be that well educated. And they've been passed by, and they feel injured by the politicians in Washington, and the way Trump must have felt injured, and I write in my book, felt injured as a child, because he felt that his parents may have told him that they loved him, but he was never held, never cuddled, and he never really felt loved. So he ended up compensating by loving himself.
I think you just actually succeeded in making me feel sorry for this guy.
Right. Well, don't get too sorry for him because he's very destructive, but he really did need to be loved and loved himself. And so what's happened is he has really found a group of people, a lot of them, who have felt similarly to him, that they felt excluded, they felt marginalized. People who work hard, who go to church, who have families, but who really have felt marginalized, haven't had good education, haven't had good jobs. And he taps into their resentment and their sense of injury, and he becomes adored because they feel understood by him. It's almost like they can see him. He can see them. He can see himself in their eyes. Let's put it that way. They can mirror him. He never had that kind of experience as a child, but he does as an adult in his rallies. He really can feel increased and increased in size and power and impact through the audience that he deals with. So his celebrity comeback is like how he inspires people, and other people feel they can be rich, they can have a comeback, they can do what he's done. And only he did it really because of the TV show, mostly The Apprentice, and where he was reading from a script. People feel inspired by somebody who speaks plain language, who doesn't use fancy words, who is able to just say whatever he feels. And one of the things that he's done with California in particular is he's called it phony and fake and dishonest. And I think that he really does envy it. He envies the fact that people are doing well there. People are generally happy there. People have sunshine there.
It's also
People
the home of
didn't
many
vote for him.
celebrities who are very vocal about not
There's
liking him.
lots of real, genuine celebrities there who are really loved, and the people didn't vote for him, and they would never vote for him. And so I think that he would like to spoil their goodness, and that's why he would like to poison them with increasing poison fumes. It's like a creative flatulence from cars that he wants to fart in California atmosphere, and spoil it, spoil the city, spoil the cities.
You know what?
And
I
spoil
need to
the
let
countryside.
I need to let our listeners know that this is not a one-on-one conversation. This is a one-on-many conversation. I want you folks who are listening in who want to hear the doctor's opinions on your take on this. We're talking about
Yes.
Donald Trump. We're talking about everything that's wrong with him, specifically his ongoing obsession with his need to criticize, his need to flagellate, his need to laugh at California. And what that means, we can also talk about, because I know it's on the minds of some of you, what it means to have a lettered doctor here talking about someone he has not examined personally. No, we're not going to get away with that one. So let's go ahead and open up the phone lines.
You can take that.
All right, we're at 8080810 8080 is the number to call. It's the John Rothman Show. I'm Angie Curro here on KGO, just for the evening. He'll be back again tomorrow. Justin Frank is on the line. Justin, so let's go to this question about, we always hear that it is unethical for a doctor who has not examined a person personally to make projections or to make, issue edicts about what their mental health is. Can you address that?
Well, I think it's a very important question, and it has been unethical. Certainly, it was adopted as a lack of ethics in 1965 after a group of psychiatrists were polled about whether Barry Goldwater was stable enough, he was running for president against LBJ, whether he was stable enough to have his finger on the nuclear button. And this group of psychiatrists who were polled said no. And then he lost the election. Goldwater lost the election, not because of that probably, but what happened was they sued the American Psychiatric Association, and he won a judgment of, I think, $75,000. And what happened is that the APA set up these rules write about a person you haven't treated or seen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that, you can't write about, in my experience, you can't write about a person that you haven't you can't write about a person once you have treated them because it's confidential. So that argument doesn't make sense. And having a one-time psychiatric evaluation, you're not going to learn a lot about a patient or a person that way. I mean, I'm a psychoanalyst. I do intensive work. Now, as far as treating somebody who I have not seen personally, there's a process called applied psychoanalysis, which is a very distinguished, well-known process that was started by Freud and many followers, where they did intensive investigations of people who you could never get in your consulting room, like famous people, public figures, historical people. Freud analyzed several historical people, and in doing the analysis, it wasn't like just suddenly making things up. It was spending months and months and months of researching everything about the person, looking for patterns, looking for different kinds of behaviors. I took 2 years to write this book.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote something about this book. I wrote something years before I even started the book about, I just ran across it, about how Trump was a dangerous person to the country when he talked about vaccines causing autism.
With that, Justin, I got to ask you to hold off just a second because the
Sure.
clock is way behind here. But I'm glad you answered that. You answered it thoroughly. And when we come back, we're going to get to these phone calls that are stacking up at 80-80-810. We're going to start things off with John in Pleasant Hill as soon as we're back from this break here on KGO 810. I am a woman of my word with Justin Frank on the line. We're talking about the mental state of Donald Trump and specifically what the heck he's got against California. And as I promised, we are going right to the phone lines. I told John in Pleasant Hill to hang on. So, John, with that, you get to start us off. Good evening.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, good
Hi, John.
evening. Thank you very much. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? I wish I was
Well,
out there
I'm
instead
good,
of
but
living here in the
I'm
swamp.
a little argument.
But it's good to
Well,
hear your questions.
I'm a little argumentative, okay?
Okay, we're ready.
And I guess the first thing, when you use the word hate, hating California, that's a very, very severe word to use. And I don't think he really hates California or Californians, but I think he's, like I am very disappointed in seeing the socialistic tendencies that California is gravitating toward. Things such as, sanctuary cities, where these cities will not release criminals who've committed severe crimes to ICE so that we can deal with them appropriately. They're not going after the average illegal immigrant. They just want the lawbreakers, the murderers, the rapists, and that sort of thing.
Do you feel like that's what is that what Donald Trump is? I mean, I've never heard him articulate that clearly.
Well, he's never articulated the fact that he's a hater. He's not a hater. He doesn't like behavior. And you know what? I don't particularly like Trump's personality either. And also what the psychologist said there, it sounds
I'm a
like
psychiatrist, not a psychologist. I have an MD. I'm a physician. That's okay.
Well, John, let's let Justin get a word in here because I'm sure he's got a lot to comment on.
I have
Justin?
a couple of thoughts about it. I think hate is the right word. I think that anybody who tries to separate mothers from children hates families. I think that it is cruel to separate mothers from children, to put children in cages like he's doing. I think that is the word. The proper word is hate. The proper word is cruel. If you listen to what he talks about, if anybody strikes me, I'm going to hit them back 10 times harder. I want to elbow them. I want to destroy them. I want to destroy Obama. I don't think that's about socialism. It's not about a belief. It's about hate. It's very personal with him, and he's always been like this. He threw rocks at a 5-year-old boy in a playpen. He has a history of violently attacking people who he dislikes and hates. it's very clear to me. It's always been this way about him, and I think that he is comfortable expressing those feelings, which gives people a lot of relief because a lot of people have similar feelings of rage, aggression, hurt, and I think that he has tapped into a feeling that exists in a lot of us. But when he was talking about the people coming across the border or wanting to ban all Muslims, that's not about socialism. That's about racism.
And with that, we need to
the Muslims are not socialists. The Muslims are brown-skinned people. This is a man who, with The Apprentice, what he initiated was the concept of anger as entertainment. And it was a very powerful thing he did. And I think that unconsciously he really felt lied to by his parents when they told him how much they loved him. If you want to read my book, which it really is very detailed about his childhood, about his behavior and throughout his life, the word is hate. That doesn't mean that all of his followers hate the same way he does. I don't think you, John, are driven by hate.
But I do think he does attract people who do hate. You know what, Justin? We got to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to be taking more calls. 8080810 if you'd like to pick up the one open line. 808810. It's the John Rothman Show. My guest is Justin Frank, MD. We're going to be back in just a moment here on KGO. Angie Coiro in for John Rothman. Just for tonight, I got Justin Frank on the line. He is the author of a number of what I consider the couch books. He initially burst on the scene with Bush on the Couch, Inside the Mind of the President. He subsequently gave the same treatment to Obama, and now Trump on the Couch, Inside the Mind of the President. We've gone to the phone lines at 808810. We're going to start with Dr. Richard, who is calling in San Rafael. Hi, Dr. Richard.
Hello. Hi. I'm enjoying the psychoanalytic view. I think you're eloquent in the way you talk about it. I find it refreshing. I'm a clinical psychologist. However, what I don't hear is a reference to what Freud called the oceanic feeling and what Jung called the participation mystique. That I'm not saying that I'm for Trump or anything like that, but I do see a dynamic where there's the ganging up, the herd mentality that at all cost must see him as the devil, so to speak. And I think that's also compensatory amongst those progressives who would have to see him that way for something compensatory that's there also about lack. I'd like you to comment on that because I'm concerned with that one-sidedness.
Justin Frank?
I think that's a great comment and very important. I didn't start out being one-sided in particular, although I did not like some of the things that he said, which I felt were inflammatory and destructive, first about Mexicans coming across the border, and then even about telling parents that they shouldn't vaccinate their children. That was pretty outrageous to me as a physician. I think that the oceanic feeling, he gets a feeling that Freud wrote about. It's a feeling of oneness with the world that's very common and important as a part of adolescence, that people who are adolescent can feel this incredible connection with the cosmos, with the universe. And I think that that's something that gets repressed and not really fully experienced in adulthood. And now, with all the divisiveness and what's going on, it's very hard to get in touch with those kinds of positive feelings and those kinds of overwhelming, connected feelings. I think that Trump recreates those feelings at his rallies. I think that his rallies are extremely special. They're extremely oceanic, and there's a reverberation between him and his audience that is very much like they can see themselves in his eyes, and he can see himself in their eyes. And it's very much the way infants and mothers interact which is that the baby can look at the mother and see itself in its mother's eyes because the mother smiles in response to it and all of that. And the beginning of an oceanic experience has to do with those very early life times. I think that people who are angry at Trump, I do think that anger is compensatory. I agree with you to some extent. I think it's compensatory to cover over fear. I think a lot of people are afraid of how they see him as being destructive, the way he dehumanizes the people he criticizes by calling about infestations and vermin and all of those things. And those are dehumanizing, and they're not oceanic, they're anti-oceanic. And then he becomes oceanic in his rallies, so he can do both. And it's a very powerful thing. I think he is a compellingly powerful leader. And psychologically, he's adept at connecting with people who have felt, rightly or wrongly, and often rightly, who have felt injured and hurt and in their lifetimes. And so I do think there's a lot of that. The feeling that is the danger that people who are angry at him, they feel that he's dangerous to the Constitution, that he essentially says, I'm not going to, if Congress won't give me money, I'm just going to get it from the Pentagon, and the hell with Congress for the wall. They feel that he's dangerous, and my feeling is that he attacks reality and attacks truth. So when he drew that map about Alabama, that's a visual attack on reality, and it is not just a simple compensatory action. There's a hatred of truth.
Justin, I want to give Richard a chance to get one more comment in because we need to move on.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I appreciate the meeting of the ways that you're allowing my critique. I appreciate that. Many times this show can turn into a polarized circumstance.
No.
Which makes you a good psychoanalyst. So my concern there is the oceanic feeling of the one-sidedness also occurs, for example, with the 1%ers and the 99%ers, where the motivation there is to excel. I would say survivor guilt, for example. To excel, to do well, is something that implicit in that is pejorative or something wrong. And so then one has to then level oneself to the least common denominator. I think that's a great question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Justin.
I'm done.
The 1%ers do want to excel. The feeling that other people might have about that is that they do it at the expense of others, not necessarily only because they're very smart and competent. Trump didn't pay his bills forever. For most people, he stiffed all the people who worked for him. I actually have a friend who did the electrical, I couldn't use this in the book because it's a personal story, but I could say it on the radio, I guess. I have a friend who did the lighting for the Taj Mahal in Atlantic City, his big gambling casino. And he knew, he's a New Yorker and he's an electronics expert, and he knew about how Trump doesn't pay his bills because Trump will just pay a third down and then he'll never pay the other two-thirds. So this friend of mine raised his rates 300%. And so when Trump paid him a third down, he was actually paying him all that he had expected to get if Trump had paid the full amount.
It is such a New York story.
It's a great New York story. So he actually did. He is the only businessman I know personally who never got hurt by Trump. So I think that it's a complicated thing, and it's scary to have this person as president. I agree with you that one of the problems about 1%ers and 99%ers, it risks the dehumanization of the other group, whatever the other group is. And that I think you're very onto something very powerful, which is that one of the dangers of the people who oppose Trump, and I've really felt very uncomfortable about the degree of the pathology that he shows, because one of the dangers is that I could become a way of just seeing him in a one-sided way and dehumanizing him. And that happens whenever there is more than one group. There's the out group or the other and the in group. And
Justin,
so
let me scooch on to some phone calls here, because we got a ton of calls
I'm
here.
sorry. I'm
Not
going
at all.
on here.
I can't wait till I have you here live, because you and I are going to go on at great length. Richard, thank you for your call. And with that, we're going to move on down to Los Gatos so that we can talk to Leo. Hi, Leo. Thanks for waiting.
Hi. I feel completely different. I think that California is the best thing that's ever happened for Trump. It allows him to have a protagonist. He can't be a hero unless he has an enemy. And oftentimes, California plays into the role of being an enemy perfectly.
I think that's a great point, actually. I think that it's not that California is a protagonist to Trump, though. California is an antagonist to Trump. And I think that he does need to have an enemy. And one of the things that is so important for him is that, in that sense, California is not that different from Obama or from Mexicans or from Muslims. It's an enemy. The enemy of the swamp people in Washington, D.C., or the elites. He lives through enemies and creating enemies, and that's one of his strengths. He's able to make the people he talks to feel connected to him, and the other people are the enemy. And in that sense, California is very good for Trump, because it's an obvious enemy writ large, except making an enemy of the people who have the biggest voting bloc in the country is not always prudent. But I do think that unconsciously there is a need to have an enemy. And when children develop, when they're about 2, 3, 4 years old, they start thinking about, is this a good person or a bad person? Are you a good guy or are you a bad guy? It's a way kids have of organizing their world, because their world is a bit chaotic and confusing. So they organize their mind into in and out, black and white, either or. And Trump is an expert at using that part of our psyches, mine included. All of us have that.
Is that intuitive or is that studied?
What?
Is that intuitive or is it studied on his part?
I think it's intuitive on his part. I actually think that he is amazingly intelligent intuitively. And I do think that he has got a kind of intelligence that's, I don't know if it's unique, but it is unusual. And it is his ability to tap into the hurts and needs of people to divide their world into good and bad, black and white. The press is the enemy of the people. It's about enemies. And in that sense, I agree with you that he's made a great – California's a perfect foil for him.
Right.
But I do think that foil, in his case, from analyzing him and getting to know him over the last few years very intensely, is driven by his envy.
And with that, we're going to go to Daly City. Jack has been waiting. Hi, Jack. Thanks for waiting.
Hello. I also feel that your public psychoanalyzing of Trump is unfair and unethical. But I do believe that we can't make judgment calls on individuals without getting too deep into their psyche. I think that Trump is a corrupt person. But that also I can say about every other president that the United States has ever had. I can, Clinton, Bush, you can go down the line to infinitum. Okay, they all Nixon carpet bombed.
Yes.
Nixon carpet bombed Vietnam till the end of the war, where there were in excess of 3 million Vietnamese people that died. I consider that evil and corrupt.
Yes,
and
I agree with you.
I might also add that I think it's also fair to psychoanalyze the society that we live in. And I personally interact with everybody, so I know what I'm talking about. This society that we live in is a corrupt, evil, mean bunch of people that we live in. And I personally feel that Trump is a perfect complement to this society. I mean, you got corrupt people from down to the lowliest little gang member to the president.
Okay, let's get a comment back from Justin here. Jack, let's get a comment from Justin.
I actually think you have a good point also. I think that Trump represents parts that exist in all of us to some extent. I at one point wanted to write about the inner Trump, one's inner Trump, which is a part of us that might want to cheat the phone company or get away with something or get an illegal parking space. But usually it's not at the expense of others, which is what Trump does. What Nixon did was outrageous, destructive, immoral, and speaking of hate, he's a person who was full of hate. And I agree with you, and I have not done an analysis of him because it would require 2 or 3 years of research into him. It's not about this being fair or not fair. It's about being scholarly and doing an investigation. This is a deep investigation. You can read my book, and then you can decide if it's fair or not fair after you read it, because I think that it is very fair and very straightforward. One of the things that struck me when I first did this the first time with George W. Bush, I got a call from a Bush biographer who read my galley before it was published, who said to me, "I can't believe that you had these observations and theories about Bush's family," because the biographer had done direct research, including interviews, and everything I said, which was based on really reading about him and what he wrote and what was going on, was actually predictive of the actual history of who he was. The same is going to be true of Trump. The same was true of Obama. You can see things in them. Obama, by the way, is the least corrupt president we've ever had.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
But I really think he had problems, and I think he had emotional issues that needed evaluation.
I'm Angie Coiro on KGO. And Justin Frank and I have been talking for a while about getting here to my live recording sessions that I do on the peninsula. If he and I manage to make that date work, I will let John Rothman know so his audience will know too. John will tell you when Justin and I are together down the peninsula. But we got him on the phone line right now, so let's have someone join him. We're going to go to Marcus, who's checking in from Fresno. Marcus, welcome to the John Rothman Show.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I just want to say this here. I think that the mistake that a lot of people make is that we really give this man too much credit for being a thinker. He is not a thinker. What he is a child. He's a very spoiled brat and always has been. And so anybody who upsets him, he treats as a bully. He is a bully, and he's very petulant. And it's simply that. His whole agenda, domestic agenda, has been to undo what Barack Obama has done.
Right.
Barack Obama was, one, a black man, and second, he made fun of him. He made him the butt of a joke.
And third, Barack Obama was loved, and Trump is not.
And so he is a corrupt individual, and he is a shameless individual. And his entire behavior is motivated based upon somebody who is selfish, corrupt, as you've indicated, and simply that.
All right, let's get a quick comment from Justin before we're done here. Go ahead, Justin.
One of the things that the book is about, and what I'm about as a psychoanalyst, is trying to understand how a person got to be shameless and corrupt, for instance. What are the things that lead to it? What are the things that cause it? I'm interested in unpacking who Trump is and trying to understand the influences on him and how he was. Because I don't know.
With that, Justin, I got to let you go. We got the network news climbing up.
But he wasn't born shameless. That's all I'm saying.
Justin, you're awesome. Thank you for joining me again. We're going to get together in person as soon as we can. Justin Frank, his book is Trump on the Couch. I'm Angie Coiro in for John Rothman. We're going to get some network news at the top of the hour now and come on back and talk about the new bird shortage, loss of birds across the U.S. It's KGO 810.